All right, guys, this is making up from the time we lost to the fire drill today. And what we have is Julius Caesar has just been assassinated. And he had taken measures that should anything happen to him, his nephew, young man named Octavian, was going to succeed him. So he adopts Octavian, and Octavian is now his son. And I'll tell you the comedic part of the story tomorrow with Octavian being sickly and doing his mathematical computations. And he does. He makes it to Rome, where he walks up to the other two right-hand men of Julius Caesar, one Mark Antony and one Mark Lepidus, and says, "Hi, I'm Uncle Julius's son. Here's this scroll," where the army was told to obey young Octavian as if they would Julius Caesar himself. Remember, Caesar's got this loyal, this trained, this veteran army. And so the three guys formed the second triumvirate with Octavian, Mark Antony, and Marcus Lepidus. And they asked the young Octavian, "Well, if you're in charge there, young, sickly little Poindexter, what's your first order?" "Well, I say we track down the men that killed Julius Caesar, Uncle Julius, and we get them." And so the three men will track down and eliminate all of the assassins. They save Brutus for last. They want him to know they're coming, to sweat it out, to know that each night he lays his head down on his pillow, the three guys may be coming for him. Think about it when you know that you're in trouble. Is getting in trouble and the punishment worse, or is it the anticipation and the waiting? So when they were done, they take a page out of the generals of Alexander the Great, and they divide the empire into thirds. Marcus Lepidus gets most of North Africa. Mark Antony ruled the eastern part of the empire, Greece, Israel, Jordan, Syria, Turkey, on down to Egypt. And Octavian controlled the western part of the old Roman Empire, like from Greece over to the west, modern-day Italy, France, Spain, those areas. And this is how things go for about 10 years. During that time, Octavian began to receive reports that Mark Antony was conspiring against him. I guess he went down to Egypt, and as he docked in the port of Alexandria, a Nile River barge was floating down the Nile. It was covered in silk curtains. Candles were lit. Incense was burning. It was covered in flower petals. And what worked once might work twice. Cleopatra was laid out on the bow, her head in her hand, naked like she was for Uncle Julius. She figured, well, if they can't stop it, I'm going to keep running it. And her and Mark Antony instantly fall in love. So hearing that Octavian and Cleopatra were conspiring against him, Octavian attacks, and a civil war breaks out in the Roman Empire. Octavian was angry, one, to make sure that there were no fracturing of the alliance. He arranged a marriage between his sister Octavia and Mark Antony. So not only is Mark Antony cheating on his sister, but he's doing it with Uncle Julius's old girl. And Mark Antony was like, "Oh my God, there's Uncle Julius's girlfriend, but wait a minute, he's dead." The whole Nile River barge thing, like whatever. And so the Civil War starts, and Octavian has that veteran army of Julius Caesar. And while they loved Mark Antony, they've grown loyal to not only Octavian, but they remember Julius Caesar's orders: "You listen to my nephew as if he were me." And Octavian defeats Antony and Cleopatra in Greece. And then there's a naval battle where Cleopatra unleashes her navy, and Octavian wins that. And Cleopatra flees back to Egypt, and Mark Antony is going to hold them off until he finds out that he is surrounded. And Mark Antony, rather than be captured and taken back to Rome in dishonor, he runs himself through with his sword and kills himself. Upon hearing this, according to legend, Cleopatra ordered a servant to bring her a basket of fruit, and in it had to be 2 Egyptian asps, ASPs, poisonous snakes, and she reached her hand in there to get the fruit. One of them bit her, and Cleopatra died. She claimed that Mark Antony was the only man she was ever truly in love with, and they were dead. Now, if you go down to the Auckland Art Museum, excuse me, where the big twisty sticks are in front, you go in the front gallery and immediately turn to the right. On the wall in there is a giant painting of the death of Cleopatra. It's giant. It's about as big as my billboard over here. And so now the Mediterranean world is being run by Octavian. Coincidentally, about 2 years ago on the coast, in what they thought was a sand dune, but it was a man-made structure covered with sand, the Egyptians believe they have found the tomb of Antony and Cleopatra, and they are examining it to see if they can open it without damaging any of the artifacts inside, according to Zari Hawass, the head of Egyptian antiquities. But we'll keep an eye on that. So anyway, Octavian, at the age of 32, the exact same age as Alexander the Great, is the sole master of the Mediterranean world. He is in charge. And this is a key moment because it signifies the end of the 500-year-old republic, where we are never going to be ruled by a king again in 509 BC. Well, that ends in 31. The Senate was terrified of Octavian. Now he comes back and says, oh, I'm going to give the power back to the Senate, but that's trash. He had the best legions posted around the city, and they're like, oh, we can't let you step down, Octavian, you're too great. And he's like, well, if you really want me to stay in power, I guess I will. And Octavian is no longer the sickly little boy. Maybe the city air agreed with him. He's no longer like dripping with snot and coughing all the time. But he's grown into a strong man. He's a big, strapping, strong young man who has proven to be a capable leader. And always remember that Octavian was really smart. He was always bright. And the Senate gives Octavian the title known as Augustus, which literally means exalted one. It's at this point that he is going to be viewed as a living god, like a demigod, half man, half god in Rome. And they also call him Imperator, which simply means emperor. And Augustus is going to wear purple robes. All right? For all intents and purposes, he is the emperor, but he tries not to call himself that. And he is going to reign from 31 BC, and this is important, to 14 AD. Octavian is now known as Augustus, will bridge the gap between 1 BC and 1 AD. And he ushers in what's known as the Imperial Age of Rome, or Pax Romana. P-A-X-R-O-M-A-N-A. It simply means Roman peace. And the government that Octavian is going to set up, sometimes is known as the Augustan Principate. It will carry, he is the first of the great Jedi emperors, well, not the first, he's one of the great Jedi emperors that can see into the future like a great chess player and knows that the decisions he makes will reciprocate throughout time. If we do this now, it'll reverberate and have this effect on my empire. And it will carry Rome for the next 200 years in Rome's golden age of governance and culture. So in Pax Romana, Octavia, now named Augustus, is going to add, whoops, I forgot to change the slide here. All right. Here are the three guys. This is Octavian, this is Mark Antony, and this is the Mark Lepidus. Lepidus retires in like North Africa. He's like, man, I'm tapping out, Octavian. You're clearly the guy. Here is, Augustus, Octavian chasing Cleopatra and Mark Antony down into Greece, then fighting on the sea, and finally in the Nile River Valley. All right, Octavian is the unchallenged ruler of Rome. This great age of Pax Romana, governance, and culture. And so Augustus is going to take over. He's going to kickstart his reign by keeping up, his uncle Julius's reforms, but he's going to add something to them. He wanted to help Rome recover from the Civil War period. And as he does, he lays the foundation of this great government that is going to last for 200 years. He does 5 quick things. Number 1, he leaves the Senate in place. He says, Senate, you're going to meet. You can come and you can discuss and you can debate, but I'm going to tell you what we're going to do. You can disagree in here with me. We can debate it. But when we step outside, we are all going to say the same thing. This is what we are going to do. And added to that, he allows for men of ability. He creates an efficient, well-trained civil service program where smart men, men of ability, regardless of your social class, if you want to work in government and you are intelligent, you should have access. Men, regardless of ability, should have access to high-ranking jobs in government. Now, he was not born poor, but as a young man, no one would have expected the sickly little nerdy Octavian to grow into the leader of the greatest empire the world had seen yet. So it doesn't matter who you are, if you can do the job, I want you in my government. Across the world at nearly the exactly same time over in China, the Han Chinese will institute something known as the Civil Service Exam, the Confucian Civil Service Exam, and it will continue to help run China for years. 2 great empires do the exact same thing at the exact same time. Augustus also ordered a census to get the population of the Roman Empire. We're coming up to the holidays, and in the Christian world, there's the story of the Nativity, Mary and Joseph going to Bethlehem for the census. Well, it's Augustus that ordered it. Again, that's the switch from 1 BC to 1 AD. And what Augustus wanted to know, this is brilliant, it's the first time that we've seen it, maybe, Osaka in India, but he wanted to know where his population centers were. Where do most people live? Now, we know that around Rome about this time, there was about 1 million people. It was a big city. But where are the other areas where a lot of people live who consume a lot of resources? Augustus's idea was if you consume a lot of resources, then you should pay more taxes. I don't want to just know how many people live where, but it helps me levy taxes. If you use more, you're going to pay more. Cornstalk, Iowa should not pay as many taxes as New York City, right? There's more people, more roads, more sewage, more electricity, more policemen, more firemen, all right? We need more things, so you're going to pay more. Also, he wanted to know crop yields. If over here, if Jake has a bumper crop and he's got a lot of excess food, let's take it and let's share it over here with Catherine. Her area is experiencing a drought and a famine, so she needs a little bit of help. Jake has more than he can use, so we'll transfer it. Later on, maybe Jake's going to have a bad time, and we can shift resources there. But I got to know what's happening. So this is a brilliant idea that he has. And he cements ties with provinces by an idea that I call making the world Rome. Right? He began to build small little miniatures of Rome all over. Some of the best Roman ruins are in North Africa or in southern France. And he said, we've maxed out our population here in Rome, so we're going to move outside the city and we're going to build another one. Right? And we're going to cap its capacity, 15,000, 20,000. So even a plebeian out in the wilderness can now be a patrician in town. And this is awesome. And when you've reached capacity, instead of adding on to that city, we're going to go 20 miles down the road and build another one. And what this does, this Make the World Rome policy, is it exports Roman technology and culture to not only around Europe, but to Africa and Asia as well. Roman culture will be diffused throughout the empire. And Augustus is going to create a currency with his picture on it. And it's called a denarii, and it is now the only coin that could be used for buying, selling, and trading throughout the empire. He wanted to make trade more efficient. And the last thing he does, I don't know if I have a slide of it in here somewhere, but he builds this road network. If you can see it, there's Augustus's money there. He builds these roads. So if you go to Europe today, some of the road systems that you're going to drive on were laid by the foundations were laid by the Roman legions and engineers. Reform number 5, he liked Uncle Julius's idea of putting the people to work. So the unemployed people and soldiers began to build a series of all-weather roads. And they linked the empire. You start out having the Rome to Pisa road, the road to Florence road, the Rome to Naples. And they're connected. And from them they spill out like spokes on a wheel all the way up into London, over into Turkey, down into Spain. And these roads would connect all parts of the empire. For speed, for communication, for travel and trade. And it was absolutely brilliant. If you go some parts of Italy today, you can see underneath the pavement are cobblestones laid by the Roman legions. If you go to southern France, the Pont du Gard or the Nîmes River Bridge, you can still drive on it. Well, it's been a while. But it was built by Augustus Caesar. And so this great period is going to run for 200 years. And Augustus was the first guy that creates a plan for someone to replace him after his death. Up to this point in Roman history, no one passed the title down hereditarily from father to son. But Augustus makes this into law, and he begins sharing power with his son, a young guy named Tiberius. And he took Tiberius with him into business meetings to show him how to govern. And Tiberius sat in the back, and little by little he was allowed to come up to the table. And then he was allowed to ask questions, and eventually he began to give input. And as Tiberius got older and began to give input and make decisions and lead presentations, Augustus receded to the background. He was always there, always keeping an eye on his son if he needed him, but he was getting Tiberius trained to take over. So when Augustus dies in 14 AD, it's a smooth transition of power. And Tiberius officially declared that the ruler of Rome, the emperor, who Tiberius made no bones about calling himself the emperor, was hereditary. And so Pax Romana allows Rome to achieve great feats, to make outstanding contributions to the modern world. And it ends in 180 AD during Pax Romana, during the reign of Marcus Aurelius. During this time in Rome, there was peace, there was order, and a sense of unification. Oops.
Good afternoon, Chapel Hill staff, with the owner of a white Toyota Scion, parked in the C parking lot in space number 44. Please come and move your car, as it is in the middle of our practice area. Thank you.
The Roman Empire stretched from the Euphrates River, over here, modern-day Iraq, all the way up to the border of England and Scotland, down to Spain and North Africa. It was enormous. Roman legions protected the borders and the road networks. It was safe. People thought that every day was better than the one before. And here's what I want you to understand. If I maybe slink over to the map before, if my clicker, which I think is dying, will actually work. All right. All right. Well, there's part of what I want to show you. Maybe this one will work better. The Roman road networks are going to mesh on over here with Asia. And then in Asia, we've got the old road built by King Darius, the Great Royal Road. Then in India, there's the road network built by Osaka. And then coming out of China was their trade network. So you have four great regional empires. Rome, Persia, India, and China. And this opens up what is known as the Silk Road. We're selling gold and slaves and ironwork for silk and spices from China and India, from horses and glassware and porcelain and gold and salt coming out of North Africa. The Great Silk Road superhighway is safe because there are these regional empires, Rome, Persia, Gupta India, and then the Han Dynasty China becomes the greatest mover of cultural diffusion the world has seen. Literally everything, as you can see, is being traded right here. So when Rome and people from the Hellenistic world mesh and synthesize their ideas together, the thoughts of culture and religion and politics will have a massive impact on the rest of the world, and I will tell you about it tomorrow.